session almost immediately, but.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, but I'm gonna,
Yep, I know.
all right. So, it is 6:45. I love that hammer. I will say, Terry, I think you didn't use the hammer enough. Anyway, our first order of business is an anticipated executive session, so the chair would entertain a motion.
I'll move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss a labor relations agreement with employees under the provisions of Title I, Sections 313A1B of the Vermont statutes, and invite Police Chief Patrick Foley, Police Lieutenant Josh Moore, and Finance HR Director Shirley Goodell-Lackey, and Town Manager Eric Wells to join.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are going to be in executive session. We are out of executive session. I am going to ask Eric if you could summarize the topic before us, and then there will likely be a motion.
Yep. The slide, where the mics are muted. There we go, thanks. So this evening, the select board is asked to consider approving an MOU with the police union that would adjust the current union wage scale. It's brought to the select board amid a very challenging time in the job market, especially for law enforcement personnel. The MOU is intended to assist the town in remaining a competitive employer for police personnel. In addition, the select board's asked to consider amending the police recruitment and retention program. These changes would establish stipends of $3,700 in May 2023 and 2024 for current staff, and a $10,000 newly hired staff bonus split over multiple years. There's two motions suggested with the manager's report to consider.
So given that, the chair would entertain, actually, we could do one, if somebody wants to make both motions at the same time, if that is your desire, chair would entertain that.
I motion we accept Eric Wells' proposal.
Do the reading.
Yeah, actually, there's a.
Yeah. I move to approve and authorize the town manager to sign a MOU with the New England Police NEPBA Local 409. I can't pronounce some of these words, excuse me.
Okay.
Move that the town manager be and hereby is authorized to implement for the town of Williston Police Department an amended hiring and retention incentive pay plan, subject to allowable adequate funding and appropriation to include without limitation budgetary savings, American Rescue Plan Act funds, future budget allocations, or any combination thereof, as outlined in the memo dated April 18th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Okay. Minutes. Chair would entertain a motion.
Move to approve, subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so let's, page 1.
I have just one minor correction. Maybe Gene has the same one, but under the motion, where it says page 1 approval of minutes, there's an N missing from Gene's last name.
I've only been to 4 meetings and they've got it wrong twice, Terry. Thank you for catching it both times.
Okay. Page 2. Page 3. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who has a wish to speak about any topic actually whatsoever, whether it's on the agenda or not? one person, then I'll ask about Zoom. So if you can come on up and state your name and give us your comment.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ryan Allen. I'm a lifelong resident of Williston, other than going away for school. I was a premature birth. One of the ways that it impacted me was I had club feet, which for those that don't know, it's kind of like if you had like skiing slow down feet, but all your life. It turns out that having skiing feet for all your life doesn't really promote to walking, but I was lucky enough to have a surgery as a toddler, and I also had surgeries for my bladder. As a result of those surgeries, I have to use catheters. I don't know if you want to look at them. Take one down, pass it around. But it's a foot long, goes in my penis. The second bladder surgery augmented my bladder by using my intestines. So I produce mucus in my bladder that I have to irrigate once a week with sodium chloride fluid. There's 3,000 milliliters in this bad boy. I use 500 every week to 1,000. And I really can't tell you how much it's improved my life. So it obviously makes me mad when I hear people talking about like how like abortion rights aren't good, or how like it's bad for like trans kids to like be who they are, because I was, and I still am, allowed to be who I am. And I want to make sure that that it's just not just Ryan Allen that gets to like, you know, improve my life by using a catheter and getting to choose when I urinate. But after the news reports about John Murad coming out, I don't know if other people will have those rights. When acting Burlington Police Chief John Murad, when it was reported that he harassed a University of Vermont medical surgeon, of course his day through the system is still going, but it's not hard to believe that a police officer would use their threat of violence, the threat of either a gun or putting them in cuffs and dragging them down to the jail cell, as the report said. And it just really makes me worried about my HIPAA rights. I don't go to the doctor and I don't invite John Murad, like, hey, John, what do you think about my bladder problems? And John Murad has no right in my medical process, in my medical talks with my doctors, with surgeons, with nurses. It's really messed up that, you know, not only the person who had been shot, their HIPAA rights were at risk, but, you know, without any consequences from Burlington Mayor Weinberger, are any of our HIPAA rights okay in Vermont? Do we have HIPAA rights right now? Or can John Murad just go in and harass anyone until he is able to get whatever files he wants, or get whatever he wants? If he doesn't like abortions, is he gonna respect that we just changed our Vermont Constitution overwhelmingly throughout the state to allow everyone to have their own have control over their own reproductive systems? That's huge. But we don't have those rights if we can't say, like, without that due process. We need confidence that the University of Vermont's Medical Center is going to stand up for our HIPAA rights, and it terrifies me. It really does. I work with kids all day, and I just want them to have the best options, and Like, I shouldn't have gotten mine and then screw everyone else. I need your all help to stand up for my rights, for the rights of our Williston community, for all Vermonters that are protected under HIPAA, all United States humans who are protected under HIPAA. I need you all to use your influence and your power to let the Burlington City Police and the City Council know that it's not okay that John did these things, and he needs to face consequences like a leave with no pay, and until his court, until the Vermont Criminal Justice Council has their ruling. And if the University of Vermont Medical Center can't guarantee our HIPAA rights, then why are they operating in Williston? We need to protect our rights, especially if those are vulnerable. I obviously have white skin and I was born with a penis, and I get a lot of airtime and I got a lot of voice time, but really I just want to know that everyone else is taken care of too. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Ryan, for, having the courage to stand up here and speak to us.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. The town works real hard on, equal rights for everyone. It's part of our, our town bylaws. We're working on it. Thanks to people like you bringing it, you and Crystal Lee McSweeney and other residents of the town. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Mike.
You're welcome.
I hope you all have a good night. I'll grab
You too. Is there anybody else in the room that has a public comment? Okay, is there anybody on Zoom?
No one on Zoom, Ted.
Okay. Okay. Next on the agenda, resolution for a retiring employee.
So we're here this evening to honor Debbie Roeder, our Assistant Library Director, who will be retiring at the end of the week after just over 36 years of service to the town of Williston. We just had the pleasure to attend a retirement reception for Debbie late this afternoon. It was great to hear stories and see pictures throughout the years of her great work here in the town and connection with a lot of former colleagues and current day colleagues and friends and community members. So I have for the board to consider this evening a resolution recognizing and thanking Debbie for her service. Before you consider, and Library Director Jane Kearns would like to say a few words as well after you consider the resolution.
Sorry if I'm repeating myself at all, Debbie. We did just have a celebration, and I just wanted to thank Debbie for her outstanding commitment to Dorothy Alley Memorial Library and the town of Williston for the last 36 years. Her contribution hasn't been just to our library, but to libraries around the state. At our Vermont Library Conference last week, she was honored with the Birdie Award, which is given to a librarian who has provided outstanding service in the field of technical services, which Debbie has. She's led efforts to keep the shared catalog organized and accessible. She's developed one of the best audiobook collections in the state, provided patrons with exemplary customer service and research support, cared for our Williston historical print collection with great care, and supported 3 library directors and mentored many colleagues through the many changes from the original library, which was the Williston Historical Society, through the additions in '86 and '98. Over her 36 years at the library, Debbie has demonstrated service and excellence year after year in her work. Thank you, Debbie, for all your work.
So just that, so that it's a matter of the record, that's the electronic record here, if I could read the proposed resolution and then ask for a motion. Resolution of the Williston Selectboard. Whereas Debbie Roeder joined the Dorothy Alling Memorial Library on January 5, 1987, and served in the position of Assistant Library Director, and whereas on April 21, 2023, Debbie Roederer retired from the Dorothy Alling Memorial Library, having served the community of Williston for over 36 years. And whereas Debbie Roederer throughout her career exemplified the mission of Dorothy Alling Memorial Library to provide services and resources which support lifelong learning to the community. And whereas the dedication of Debbie Roederer to serve the community and to the field of technical services cannot be understated. And whereas Debbie Roederer has served as a mentor to her colleagues at Dorothy Alling Memorial Library and to librarians across the state of Vermont, sharing her experience, knowledge, and wisdom, now therefore be it resolved, the Williston Selectboard hereby thanks Debbie Roederer for her 36 years of dedicated service to the community and the people of Williston as a member of the Dorothy Alling Memorial Library, and wish her the very best in her retirement. That is the proposed resolution. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the resolution recognizing the service of Debbie Roeder as presented, and Debbie, you cannot be replaced. Thank you.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So, and actually, we've given another round of applause.
I'd just like to say that it's been my privilege to serve the town all these years, and thank all the library staff that I've worked with, as well as the town staff, for all their support and help. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
Welcome.
So we have two select board members who are participating virtually, so we're not going to be able to have a fully signed resolution tonight, but our town manager is really good, and I bet he can get it to you. So,
We'll make it happen.
so. Great. So, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Next on the agenda, public hearing. And unfortunately, I have to read most of this. But we're here for a public hearing on sewer allocation ordinance amendment. The notice of public hearing states as follows: pursuant to 24 VSA, Chapter 59, Section 4 of the Town of Williston Sewer Allocation Ordinance, the Williston Select Board is considering the adoption of amendments to the sewer allocation ordinance referred to as Attachment A, an existing ordinance pertaining to the allocation of public sewerage. Upon adoption, this attachment will designate the portion of the uncommitted reserve capacity that will be available for use during the next fiscal year, which starts July 1, 2023. The public hearing on this matter is scheduled for Tuesday, April 18, 2023 at 7:15 in the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room, the Town of Williston Town Hall. A remote participation option is available. Attachment A may become effective 60 days after, or may become effective 60 days after the public hearing by vote of the Select Board. Notice is hereby given that any ordinance or attachment thereto adopted by the Town of Williston may be disapproved by a vote of a majority of the qualified voters at an annual or special meeting as provided by 24 VSA Section 1973. Copies of the entire text of proposed Attachment A are available for review at the town webpage. So, with that, the public hearing is now convened. By my untrained eye, there is no one here to participate in the room, but if we could have a very brief presentation from Matt about, not that we haven't dealt with this repeatedly, but if you can give us a brief presentation, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions or if anybody hops on Zoom.
Sure, thank you. Attachment A to the sewer allocation ordinance is an amendment to the ordinance that is taken up by the Select Board annually to establish the amount of uncommitted sewer capacity that will be made available to new users, i.e. new development or additional capacity use in existing development during the upcoming fiscal year, in this case FY24, starting on July 1. It's essentially the sewer budget for the town. So the town owns capacity at the Essex Junction plant, along with the city of Essex Junction and the town of Essex. The town owns that capacity for FY 2024 in the amount of 1,100,000 gallons per day of total capacity. Of that 1,100,000 gallons per day, we're using currently a little over 676,000 gallons per day. And so that's the rolling 5-year average amount that has flown through the meter, essentially, where the sewerage crosses the border into the Essex Junction plant. So that's the total amount that we know the town is using. In addition, the town has sold approximately 38,000 gallons per day capacity to users who have not yet done their development that will use that capacity. So in other words, we count that as used, and we don't count it when we think about what's remaining available to the town to allocate. By recommendation of our engineering consultants, we also maintain a 7% reserve. So we always look at how much capacity is available to the town and set aside 7%, not to be sold to anyone, but to be kept to handle any fluctuations in usage that come about in the future. So 7% of 1,100,000 gallons per day is 77,000 gallons per day. So what we're doing is we're taking the 1,100,000 gallons per day and we're subtracting those other numbers I mentioned to determine how much capacity the select board has left to allocate to new users this year and in future years. That number for this year is just a little over 308,000 gallons per day. Williston's comprehensive plan and select board policy has been to consider that remaining capacity over a long term, 20 years in this case. So we go through the exercise of taking our just over 300,000 gallons per day, dividing it by 20, arriving at a little over 15,000 gallons per day, meaning the town of Williston could sell 15,000 gallons per day capacity every single year for the next 20 years, at which point there would theoretically be no more capacity left to sell. And so that's a number to think about when the select board adopts its attachment A every year, where it thinks about how much capacity might it make available for sale in the upcoming year, and think a little bit about what kind of development is likely to come online in the upcoming fiscal year, what's been permitted through the town's land use system, and what are typical purchase patterns that have occurred over past years. So very, very briefly, the town typically makes quite a lot more capacity available every year than is actually sold, and I'll go over those numbers real quick in a second. So you typically make quite a lot more than the 15,000 gallons per day that you could sell every single year for the next 20 years available. And over the last 10 years, the average amount of capacity that's been sold per year is a little under 10,000 gallons per day. So we might make 30, 40, or 50,000 gallons per day available across various use categories, but typically somewhere between 2,500 and 17,000 gallons per day are sold in any particular year, again breaking out to an average of about 10,000. Sewer capacity is probably the most limited infrastructure, piece of infrastructure that the town has in terms of thinking about how it supports new development. It's a finite resource right now. Capacity might be able to be expanded in the future, but it would require significant funding and technological advances and the achievement of state and federal permits whose issuance is not guaranteed. So it makes a lot of sense for the town to think carefully about how it spends its capacity. And as that capacity is sold to users and the supply going forward dwindles, I've identified on page 5 of the attachment A memo a few strategies the town might want to think about in the long term, thinking about what are the build-out scenarios for Williston that can be supported by the capacity it has, thinking about taking any opportunities to purchase new capacity as they come up. We're currently in a cycle of purchasing some additional capacity. Prioritizing the availability of capacity. There's a sort of a balancing of meeting the goals of the town plan, including things like housing, jobs creation, supporting existing industry, flexibility for existing users, et cetera. And as the town thinks about what its goals are in its comprehensive plan, it can continue via this process or other amendments to the sewer allocation ordinance, making sure that what it does with its sewer capacity reflects what its goals and how those goals are prioritized in the comprehensive plan. So I'll go into the numbers again really briefly. We have 2 full-page tables, tables 2 and 3 in the memo. Table 2 is about how much capacity the select board has typically made available for purchase. A mean of around 35,000 gallons per day capacity made available for purchase over the last 10 years, fluctuating from a low of about 29,000 gallons per day to a high of close to 43,000 gallons per day. And then table 3 looks very similar in its structure, but the numbers are quite a lot smaller. These are the gallons per day capacity that have been sold out of the sewer allocation ordinance each year for the last 10 years. And you see there that on average, a little under 5,000 gallons per day is sold to new commercial users. And on average, a little over 5,000 gallons per day is sold to new residential users. And there's a few other categories there. Residential additions, for example, when somebody adds a bedroom to an existing home. We do have an affordable housing category that occasionally there's a project that's able to take advantage of that. We have an encouraging specific development category. Sales in this category have been used to support expansion at Keurig Green Mountain, have been used to support the relocation of a primary care physician into an adaptive reuse of an existing industrial building, Evergreen Family Health, at the Whitecaps building last year. So those are those numbers. And again, outside of that, there's a reserve capacity. We don't sell that to anybody, so it sits at 0. And again, the mean sold over those last 10 years, actually, I misspoke before, it's 11,770 gallons per day. So again, less than the 15 that's typically, that 15 that would be available over the next 20 years. So the remainder of attachment A really goes into the staff and planning commission's recommendations of how much capacity would be made available to new users in the various categories that the ordinance sets up. Residential, affordable housing, new commercial or industrial, reserve pollution abatement, et cetera. And really all of the difference year to year is in the new commercial or new residential categories. As I discussed at our preliminary meeting on this matter, the biggest change being recommended this year is to make about 30,200 gallons per day available in the new residential category. The reasons for that are that we have a couple of relatively large projects in the permitting pipeline that have received approvals, that have received allocation through the town's growth management system, but that have not yet purchased any capacity to support their eventual permitting and development. So this is reflective a little bit of a lag in construction that started with COVID and continued through the increase of interest rates and labor shortages and things like that. But it's development that the town has planned for, that the town has permitted, and that will eventually start to come online. Once that capacity is sold to that user, they do pay the town to hold on to it until they begin to put it to use, at which point they pay, their sewer bill. So it makes sense, and it made sense in the estimation of the Planning Commission, to take a guess as to how much of that development in the pipeline might be ready to purchase capacity in the upcoming fiscal year, and support that with some additional capacity being made available in that new residential category. There's also a slight bump up in what's recommended for new commercial and industrial, going from making 10,000 gallons per day available to 15. That's not necessarily based on any inside knowledge we have of new commercial that is going to use a lot of sewer capacity coming online, but more so that that category tends to have more volatile demand. We were sort of in a position last year of needing to open up that encourage specific development category for Evergreen Health, because there wasn't quite enough capacity in the new commercial category to support their purchase. That meant they needed to come back, have a meeting with the select board, and have that request approved under some criteria, as opposed to just going upstairs to the Public Works office above my office and purchasing that capacity. Makes sense to support the new commercial that's coming with making a little bit more available just for the efficiency of that. Because what happens to those new commercial users is when they go to begin their state permitting process and get their state wastewater permit, the first thing they have to do is show that they've been able to purchase their capacity from the town. So when I talked to Evergreen Health last year and said, well, you know, it's going to take us a while to work through this, but I'm sure that's fine. You've got this big, long state permitting process in front of you. They said, we're not even allowed to start that until we get squared up with the town on buying capacity. And I said, well, wow, that's a much bigger burden on making that use happen than I thought there was. So that's the reasoning for that. In summary, the final table in your memo, Table 6, talks about historic approved allocations over the last 5 years, and ends in the right-hand column with a recommended slate of allocation for fiscal year 2024. The two I talked about, 15,000 gallons per day in new commercial industrial, 30,200 in new residential, a little bit more in affordable housing, same amount for residential additions, same amount for pollution abatement and encouraging specific development, a total new allocation of 65,450 gallons per day to be made available, a 77,000 gallon per day reserve. And that's the recommendation. I'm happy to answer questions. I didn't talk about my nice colorful charts this time. Happy to do whatever of that the board would like.
Thank you. Any questions? Actually, is there any questions from anybody attending the hearing or comments? Eric, is there anybody remote?
Nothing on Zoom.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I believe we should be conservative on, you know, our residential sewage allocation. The state is relaxing the rules on additions and minor subdivisions. Do we see that coming to the town where any home that's on town water sewer allotment is able to more easily go into, you know, like from a 1 unit to a 4 unit?
So what you're referring to is the bill called S100, the housing bill that's working its way through the legislature right now, Mike. And one of the elements of that bill is a preemption of local zoning that would require municipalities within the next year to adopt bylaws that allow a minimum of 5, or depending on the amendment, maybe only 4 dwelling units per acre density in areas that are served by water and sewer. So I've been tracking this bill really carefully and always with an eye towards what's it going to mean for Williston. The good news is that density preemption doesn't do a whole lot to the majority of Williston's lands that are served by water and sewer. We currently allow between 3 and 5 dwelling unit equivalents per acre in the residential zoning district. 3 for a conventional project, 5 for one that's at least 30% affordable housing. And because we use that dwelling unit equivalent metric, where a one-bedroom or studio is 1/2 of a dwelling unit, what statute requires is either 4 or 5 dwellings per acre, which we already allow. Some of them just need to be 1-bedrooms. So my read of where that bill is right now is the density preemption is a non-event for Williston's residential zoning district. We already allow quite a lot more density in the Taft Corners area, where we also provide water and sewer. In the village, we do currently have a lower allowed density, but we've been working for a year on a bylaw that would go to a more form-based metric, and then that, again, the density preemption would not have any effect on it. And municipalities will get a year to update their bylaws to respond to that, should that pass. So there are some things about density. There are some things about allowing either duplexes or fourplexes wherever a single-family home is allowed. Again, we don't regulate dwelling unit type to prohibit any of those housing types in the zoning districts that would be affected. Again, those covered by water and sewer. So probably what is happening at the state in regards to those zoning preemptions won't change very much about what kind of development is proposed and approved in Williston, if at all. So I don't think we're going to have a flood of higher density projects. And keep in mind that those preemptions are on density metrics. We still get to have number of units on a shared driveway, setbacks, wetlands and stream protections, open space requirements, design standards, lot coverage, whatever other tools we use. And the read by most of those who are looking at this bill is that it's your base density rule that gets preempted, but not the effect of your total zoning bylaw. So if you say, well, yeah, you say you can have 4 units per acre, but you've got a really constrained lot and our rules push back on that and you just can't fit 4 there, those other design standards would prevail over the density preemptions of S100.
Thank you. I still like the idea of mixed use areas and commercial buildings in those and expansions. I like to see that where we increase our tax base in the town without affecting our schooling. That 15,000 gallons per day, do you believe that is enough with what might be coming down the pipeline over the next couple of years?
Sure. Well, it would be just for the next fiscal year. We don't have any new commercial proposed or partway approved right now in Williston that would be a really big consumer of wastewater. So when I look at what's been through the DRB or going through the DRB recently, we have another large storage facility for U-Haul. We have a couple of 18 to 20,000 square foot flex industrial buildings. You could have a heavy wastewater user go into one, but there's no indication that that's necessarily going to happen. So there's industry that creates lots of jobs that doesn't generate a lot of wastewater. The industries we have that create jobs that do generate lots of wastewater are primarily our breweries and Keurig Green Mountain. And that's why that encouraged specific development decision was made almost 10 years ago to sell them that additional 10,000 gallons. The other big user, Mike, on the commercial side would be a new hotel. A single new hotel of around 100 rooms is about 10,000 gallons per day, give or take. There could be another hotel coming at some point. Williston is seen by a lot in the development community as a pretty desirable place to develop new hotels, especially as some of the older ones in town begin to age out of being able to continue their franchise, which is something we're sort of aware of happening in the background. Hotel owners have to put so much money into the hotel every so many years in order to keep what they call their flag, their brand. And that's why you see, I stayed once across from a place that had been a Ramada, And they lost their flag and they moved the R over and it became the Armada. And so, you know, we have some hotels that are getting on in years. They're 30, 35 years old now. And we have seen casual conversations with folks who are interested about, you know, what about another hotel in Williston? What about a hotel for travel services next to that brand new Park and Ride, which is a zoning district we have that allows it. Since I don't know about any of those that are in the pipeline right now, we might not need to sell any capacity to a new hotel in the next fiscal year. Or it might be something that comes up right near the end of the fiscal year. But those are the big ones. And with breweries and people like Keurig Green Mountain, we have a separate issue related to requiring pretreatment of high-strength waste and some of the other permit limits the town faces at the plant. So in short, I think 15 is enough. The kind of mixed-use buildings we get, where you've got, you know, some businesses on the ground floor and apartments up, the biggest users of water and wastewater in those are going to be if you have a restaurant of some kind or, you know, bakery, coffee shop. And even there, it's a very, very different scale from a whole new hotel or a whole new big industrial user. So I think generally supportable with that allocation.
Are you here speaking kind of specifically for the Glacier project and trying to get sewer allocation for the site-specific plan outside the growth management?
In the 30,000 GPD proposed to be made available for new residential, I have in mind the Snyder Annex project in the Taft Corners district, the Catamount Golf / Summerfield project on Mountain View Road, and probably some initial phase at least of the Glazer project. Whether that project achieves enough of an approval to be in a place to buy sewer allocation during FY24, I'm not sure. It needs to go through the specific plan process, which means it needs to be approved by the Planning Commission and ultimately the Select Board, and then it needs to go to the DRB. So there's a bit of process in front of that project, not to mention Act 250. So timing-wise, whether that specific one's in a position to buy capacity during FY24, I'm not sure. But in a general sense, the idea would be all of those major projects would be able to start buying some of the capacity they need to get started.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. Then I think we need a motion to close the hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing on the proposed sewer allocation ordinance amendment to attachment A.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? No. The public hearing is adjourned. The next on the agenda is whether or not we wish to adopt attachment A. And if that is the wish, there is a proposed motion. Or actually, should we, I'm sorry, did people want to, I guess I jumped the gun a little bit. Did people want to have more, are there any questions or comments or conversation the board wishes to have before discussing the amendment?
So I'd move to adopt the amendments to the sewer allocation ordinance, attachment A as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes.
Thank you, Matt, for putting together all these tables and graphs and
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
keeps me up at night.
You're gonna,
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
so you're gonna be taking a little break. We have the library thing to go through, and then we'll
Come back.
be back to you. So then, the next on our agenda is our continuing peace treaty with the library. Jane, did you want to?
Yeah, and I can lead off.
Okay.
Ted. So the board might recall 3 years ago, the town entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Dorothy Allen Memorial Library, and I always look at the date here, March 16th, 2020. I wonder what was going on right after that. So we were able to, both boards were able to get this done and signed, and now it's 3 years later. It was a 3-year term, this MOU. This MOU reflects the relationship between both governance entities here in town. The library trustees reviewed this back at their March meeting that I attended. There was no concerns raised with the trustees with it. They passed a motion to renew it with no changes. Town staff review of this, it's working well. I reviewed it. I spoke with Jane about it as well. There's no suggested amendments at this time from staff. Certainly open to the board's feedback if there's anything you would like us to explore further. Should the board wish to continue this MOU, motion would be in order for another 3-year term, and we prepare the document for signature at a future meeting.
Thanks. Jane, anything to add?
No, well, I can say that it's working very well. For the library, it's nice to have it defined and clear on who's responsible for what. So it has worked well.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you for the bookmobile. It's always well attended at the farmer's market on Tuesdays.
We'll be there.
Love to see the kids all run to the bookmobile. It's great. Thank you very much for doing that.
I have a question, Ted.
Sure.
I mean, maybe it's just a question for Eric, but I was just looking for some clarity on why there's an MOU for a department of the town, or is it because they have their own board? I'm just wondering why.
Yep, that's exactly right, Gene. With the libraries have the trustees that govern the library, and the library staff being town employees. This kind of defines the different relationships between governance of the library, oversight of staff, spending, manager and library director's role. There was discussion when this was put in place about when a new director was hired, what that process would look like to codify it as well. So those elements with those two different governance bodies to define it within an MOU.
It was very well written, and if it was the first draft and you went 3 years without stumbling over something that needed to be edited, clearly people did their job to look at it. I think it's an interesting document, and I also think it makes a lot of sense. I think libraries are so important and they're so unique that having professionals run them, the things that are outlined that's in their scope, makes a lot of sense to me.
Any other questions or comments? If not, a motion would be in order.
I move to renew a memorandum of understanding with the Dorothy Allen Memorial Library Board of Trustees for a 3-year term.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Aye. The ayes have it.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, local emergency operations plan. Eric, did you want to?
Yep, this is a document the board sees every year. It's required to be updated by the end of April. This feeds a countywide emergency operations plan. I shared it with the board for your review. The fire department, under Chief Collette as our emergency operations coordinator, work through this document each year. Thanks to Gene, caught a couple things on the school side. Appreciate that, Gene. I distributed that to the board today. I'll make sure we have all our items accurate. The board is requested to approve a motion for this. Should there be any questions, I can reach Lieutenant Prouty at the fire station if they're not on a call right now. So.
Okay. Are there any questions for Eric?
Okay, me again. And it's not about CVU this time. No, this is just maybe a little bit of a side, but can you give me a couple of sentences on what other processes besides making a document? I mean, do we have practices? Do we have meetings with some of those folks? Anything beyond just putting a document together with phone numbers and?
Yeah, that's been something we've been looking to formalize a bit more. I've checked with the chief about it the last couple of years. I think it would do us well to have at least start with a tabletop drill if we were to have a emergency situation in town, to have these stakeholders at the table to run through scenarios. So yeah, it's been on my mind to build from. We have the plan, but we need to practice and execute the plan as an ongoing endeavor throughout the year.
Right. I know I can speak that within the school, we're very well practiced and very well organized for an emergency in the school. If it was an emergency outside the school that needed the school facilities, I don't know that. I think would be a lot of wobbling to it wouldn't be as smooth as it should be. So I think that the district would look favorably on being in part of that as well. I did have one other question, and this is not a got you. I meant to send it to you so I make sure you knew the answer. The list of facilities in here, I didn't know what a tier 2 facility was. It seemed like kind of a random list of businesses.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. My thought is has some degree of risk assessment, but I can get that answer from the chief and follow up if the board would like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't, like I said, I usually like to give staff a heads up if I have a question, but it just seemed like an odd assortment of businesses, and it's not all the businesses, but they don't seem that special, some of them either. So I would appreciate it if you got a chance.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? I had just a comment. It's out of curiosity, I looked up today what happens if the select board, if something happens to a town select board in the state of Vermont. And the answer is that if a majority of the select board is no longer able to function, I assume meaning they're no longer around, that the minority can convene a special town meeting. If the entire select board is no longer available, I'll say, then the Vermont Secretary of State can convene a special town meeting. And it goes back to the Cold War. And I think the legislature must have said, what about the Russians? So anyway, I thought people would be really, really, really fascinated by that, so I thought I'd share it with you. So anyway.
Gives me a fuzzy feeling.
Yeah.
Hey, you
Warm
can,
feeling.
the town will continue. Okay, so there is a proposed motion.
Move to approve the 2023 Local Emergency Operations Plan.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Housing Needs Assessment Overview.
Ready to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm here just to give a really brief introduction, and then Melinda's going to take us through a presentation. But as I think evidenced by some of the materials we gave the board to review, namely 300 pages of media articles that we harvested over the last year, housing and the need for affordable and abundant housing in Vermont is certainly having a moment. It's been having a moment in Williston for as long as I've been here and some time before. Williston has addressed need for housing in many of its recent comprehensive plans over the last 20 years. It has convened special ad hoc committees or working groups around the housing issue several times, and it has adjusted its comprehensive planning, its zoning bylaw, and yes, even its attachment A to the sewer allocation ordinance over the years to attempt to further the goals of including affordable housing or making affordable housing a reality in town. And starting about two and a half years ago, when our office began its work on the Taft Corners project and the Taft Corners form-based code, which allows quite a bit more residential density in that part of town in exchange for quite a lot of design standards that are relatively challenging to achieve. As part of that process, we did a pretty big, wide open public input session, several of them, in fact, including a week-long workshop. And we heard a lot from folks about affordability and about, are you going to make sure that affordable homes are included in all of this new development that might be permitted under this development standard? And because affordable housing and some of the policy solutions to it are such a sort of a big deal unto themselves, our response at the time until a year ago was, we're really trying to set the stage with the right kind of land use controls here and the right kind of density that can be supportive of the creation of housing in Williston through this land use exercise. And we are going to be immediately upon conclusion of that project going after specifically the housing issue. And in fact, that's what we did. Last year, we asked the Select Board to support a Unified Planning Work Program item with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission to assist us in the preparation of a housing needs assessment. A housing needs assessment is a document that is required under state law for a municipality to have performed prior to adopting any zoning bylaw changes that require the inclusion of affordable homes in residential projects, a tactic known as inclusionary zoning. So the answer coming out of Taft Corners was, we're not doing inclusionary zoning as part of the Taft Corners project. Number one, because the Taft Corners project is quite large enough all by itself without adding in this housing provision. Number two, because state law requires us to do this needs assessment before we can talk policy in this way. Number three, yes, we are committed and we're going to do it. So the Select Board approved that work program request. It was funded through the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and toward the end of 2022, in partnership with the Regional Planning Commission and VHFA, VHFA prepared, in concert with Melinda and myself and other staff, a housing needs assessment for Williston. We took a couple drafts of that document through review and discussion with the Planning Commission, and we're ready now to present that needs assessment to the Select Board tonight. In the background of our presenting this to all of you tonight, we are of course talking about, well, what can Williston do about the need that's revealed by this study? And there are zoning policy things that Williston can do. There are budgetary things Williston can do. There are programmatic things Williston can do. And there are many things Williston is already doing that are quite positive in this regard, but there is more. And we expect tonight to be mostly about talking about the needs assessment itself, with a very brief concluding remark at the end about what some of those policy strategies might be. We expect to return to talk with the Select Board much more specifically about policy in the very near future. In the background, we've got the Planning Commission debating those things and thinking about them and thinking about how they might work within the rest of Williston's zoning bylaw. But we know that ultimately any changes we make will go through the Planning Commission and come back here to the Select Board. And we want to work in concert with both bodies to make sure that what is ultimately, shows up as a public hearing item before this board really contains no surprises and is something that's got some pretty broad support before we go to a hearing. So we're going to talk about need tonight. We're going to sort of take a glance at policy and programmatic changes. We're going to come back to that, and we're going to hope that we're working all in concert together over the next several months to set a direction for the town that folks feel is supportable around this issue. So, Melinda, when you're ready, we can start, and I'll stay up here to answer questions. Melinda will be here to answer questions. We've obviously also brought the Planning Commission over for a joint meeting here so that they can hear this presentation, which they've already seen a version of. They can hear some feedback from you and some questions you might have about the assessment. That'll really be helpful for them as they continue to work on some of the nuts and bolts, and we come back together again in a couple of weeks. Great,
so
thank
just
you.
to highlight that this is the first of a number of meetings that is going to have this as an agenda item, and so it's I don't say that to stifle anybody's questions, or just to give everybody a heads up that this is not the only bite at the apple tonight. But again, I certainly let's have a free-flowing discussion, questions. So.
Great. So first of all, let me just say that we're going to be talking about some different metrics in trying to develop an understanding of the housing situation in Williston. And we're going to be mentioning some numbers, and those numbers are not precise, even though they look precise, so just keep that in mind. They're just metrics to try to understand the scope of the problem. So the first one that I will talk about is what's called the Jobs to Homes Index. One of the key findings of the Housing Needs Assessment is that Williston lacks enough homes to support its workforce. So the Jobs to Homes Index is the ratio of jobs to homes. And it's one measure of the supply of workforce housing available in an area. The ideal Jobs to Homes Index would be 1.5, that is 1.5 jobs to every home. Williston had a Jobs to Homes Index of 2.7 in 2020, which is considerably higher than other towns in Chittenden County. So to reach a healthy balance of jobs to homes, Williston would need to add 3,449 homes. That's without adding more jobs. So we can look at how it is we got here. So you can see that from 1960 to 1980, the Jobs to Homes Index in Williston was actually below 1 and 1.5. Between 1980 and 2000, Williston gained 8,600 jobs, which was a 765% increase, without a corresponding increase in homes. This has resulted in the skewed jobs to homes ratio that exists today. Although it has improved a little bit, you can see the yellow line there is the Jobs to Homes Index, and it's gone down a little bit since 2000. This is, economists call this a spatial mismatch. In other words, a mismatch between where jobs are located and where job seekers live. So if you have not enough homes where a lot of jobs are, then employers will obviously have a hard time filling open positions. And this is a screenshot of a report from 2000, which talked about this spatial mismatch in Williston and in other suburbs in Chittenden County. So this issue, this problem of spatial mismatch, has really existed since the 1990s, and it has taken it's been here for a long time, and it's going to take a long time to correct. So consider the sort of regaining a healthy jobs to homes balance as being a long-term goal. Another metric that we can look at is the targets established through the Building Homes Together campaign. So this was a campaign that was initiated in 2016 by the Champlain Housing Trust, Evernorth, and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. This campaign, the intent was to address the region's severe housing shortage. And it set a target of creating 3,500 new homes in Chittenden County by the end of 2020, with 20% of them, or 700, being permanently affordable. So during that period, from 2016 to 2020, 3,659 homes were built, exceeding the overall target for production of homes. However, unfortunately, the county fell short of the second goal of the campaign to build 700 affordable homes. A total of 536 permanently affordable homes were built. achieving 77% of the goal for affordable housing. A second 5-year campaign, Building Homes Together 2.0, was launched in 2021. It's a campaign to build 5,000 homes by 2025 for people of all incomes, including at least 1,250 affordable homes. So given Williston's share of the jobs in Chittenden County, a Williston share of the county target would equal 594 homes. Only 463 homes are projected to be constructed in Williston during the period of 2020 to 2025. So when we try to get a handle on how much housing is needed in Williston to meet these targets, there's the long-term target of 3,449 homes to reach a healthy homes to jobs balance, which might be achieved in 20, 30 years. And then the shorter term target of 594 homes needed by 2025 to meet Williston's share of Building Homes Together. So this would require 172 dwellings to be built per year for the next 2 years to meet the Building Homes Together target. And if that pace was continued every year until 2043, we would close the homes to jobs ratio, assuming that no new jobs are created. The current 10-year average of home construction in Williston is 94 homes per year. Okay, so let's see. So the second key finding is that housing in Williston is becoming less affordable. And this is, to some degree, driven by the key finding number 1 of having a shortage of housing leads to inaffordability. So during the period between 2012 to 2022, home prices increased at an average annual rate of 5%, and rents exhibited a similar pattern. Median household income and average wage increased at a rate of 2% and 3% annually, not keeping up with housing costs. And over the last 5 years, prices have increased at an even faster rate of 48% from 2017 to 2022. So when we talk about housing affordability, it's really based on the relationship between someone's income and their housing costs. So housing is considered to be affordable if the monthly cost of the housing, including utilities, insurance, taxes, and homeowners association fees, doesn't exceed 30% of the household's monthly income. When a household spends more than this, they are considered to be housing cost burdened. So the graph that you see there is showing cost burden for both, for all households, which is the bar on the left, for renters, the bar in the middle, and for owners, which is the bar on the right side. The blue indicates households that are not cost burdened. The orange, households that are moderately cost burdened, and the red, households that are severely cost burdened. So in Williston, about 70% of the 914 renter households are cost burdened. 21% of the 3,129 homeowner households are cost burdened. So an estimated 750 to 2,050 Williston households live in housing that is not likely to be sustainable for them in the long run because it costs more than 30% of their income. So the third key finding is that most people who work in Williston can't afford to live in Williston. In 2021, there were 11,652 jobs in Williston. The average wage of jobs in Williston is $60,400. The largest portion of jobs are in the category classified as service producing, which includes things like retail, food services, hospitality, professional services, and healthcare. The average annual wage of service-producing jobs is $56,367. Within that share, the largest subcategory is retail, with 1,866 jobs and an average annual wage of around $38,000. Housing is considered affordable if a household spends no more than 30% of their income towards housing costs. And affordable at average wage assumes the householder works a 40-hour work week. So in this graph, the upper graph shows median gross rent is the blue line that you see, and the orange bars indicate rents that would be affordable to workers working certain jobs in Williston. The graph below that shows the median home sale price and median home sale price and home sale prices that would be affordable to workers working certain jobs in Williston. So a one-earner household earning average wages in Williston can't afford median rent. A two-earner household can't afford to buy a home at or above the median home price. So one way of trying to bridge this gap is to provide subsidized, affordable rental homes. In Williston, there are 206 publicly subsidized affordable rental homes. 92 of these are restricted to residents who are age 55 and older or who have disabilities, which means that only 114 subsidized affordable homes are available to working age non-disabled renters in town. And as of the end of last year, there were zero vacancies reported among these apartments. As the third largest employment base in Chittenden County, Williston jobs outnumber its subsidized housing stock by 56-1, a ratio that's the highest of the county's larger towns. Looking at apartments with no age or disability restrictions, Williston's ratio is even higher at 102-1. So that's subsidized affordable rental homes to jobs. So the key finding number 4 is that there's a mismatch between the distribution of household sizes and the configuration of available homes in Williston. So Williston has many more 3 to 4 bedroom homes where the greatest need is for smaller dwellings based on average household size. Nearly 61% of Williston households have only 1 or 2 people. 66% of Williston homes have 3 or more bedrooms. Only 34% of Williston homes are 1 to 2 bedrooms. So the combination of a surplus of larger houses and an abundance of smaller households represents a mismatch between supply and demand that exacerbates housing unaffordability. And why is this? Because household sizes have been shrinking over time, reflecting an aging population, as well as people having fewer children or having children later in life. From 1970 to 2010, Williston average household size decreased from 3.8 to 2.45 and is expected to decrease from 2.45 in 2020 to 2.12 in 2050. So to address the mismatch between household size and types of housing, Williston needs to increase the supply of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The town has been making progress on this. Before 1990, only 17% of homes built were multifamily. During the 1990s and early 2000s, the proportion of multifamily dwellings gradually increased. And after 2010, multifamily dwellings are making up about 75% of all dwellings built. So increasing the proportion of smaller dwelling units will not only better meet the needs of smaller households, but it will also help to increase affordability. Key finding 5, proportionally fewer African American households own their homes than white households. In Chittenden County, 65% of white households own their homes, while 35% rent. In contrast, 17% of Black or African American households own their homes, while 83% rent their homes. Note that the figures for Williston are not reliable due to high margin of error, so figures for Chittenden County are shown. Wealth creation in the United States is largely driven by home ownership, and Black Americans have historically been denied access to housing through redlining, urban renewal, and race-based housing covenants. Therefore, Black Americans have lacked the opportunities that white Americans have had to build wealth and financial equity through these means. Key finding number 6, significant needs exist for supportive housing. There's a continued demand for service-enriched housing. The number of households requiring supportive services far outnumber the services available. There's a desire for service-supportive housing for adults with developmental disabilities that is sustainable and stable, provides a sense of belonging, and offers opportunities to socialize and participate in the community in a productive, meaningful way. The town should work with partners such as the DDHI Coalition, housing developers, nonprofits, and service agencies to support the need. Key finding 7, availability is a challenge for housing in Williston. The number of Chittenden County households experiencing homelessness is a direct indication of a gap in the housing supply. In 2022, the annual point-in-time count recorded 668 individuals experiencing homelessness in Chittenden County. This number is likely an undercount. Across Chittenden County as a whole, the rental vacancy rate is at a 12-year low of 0.4%. In comparison, a 5% vacancy rate is generally accepted to yield a healthy rental market for both renters and property owners. And finding number 8, of course, where new housing is built matters. Building more homes shouldn't be done without considering location. Chittenden County has a new regional goal to ensure 90% of new development occurs in planned growth areas. In Williston, this includes the Taft Corners zoning district. Williston established a designated growth center in 2007. Since then, a steadily increasing number of dwellings have been built there. From 2017 to 2022, 76% of all dwelling units were built in the growth center. The recent adoption of Taft Corners Form-Based Code District allows for building forms that require more efficient use of land and will provide more opportunities for the creation of affordable housing in Williston's growth center. We believe that most, if not all, the need for additional housing can be met in the growth center, although through new development on vacant or underutilized lots or through redevelopment of existing commercial lots. The current bylaws and form-based code can be enhanced by additional work on the programmatic side, by investing in infrastructure, streets, stormwater, public parks and green spaces, bike and pedestrian facilities, by building better partnerships and developing the town's affordable housing trust fund, and on the policy side, by considering whether the town should move beyond incentives and outright require some portion of new dwellings to be affordable. So I think I will stop there. And
great job by all of you, you know.
So Melinda presented some highlights from a fairly lengthy report that was also distributed to the board. And she started the introduction by saying, you know, there are these numbers like 3,449. Obviously, that's a very precise number, but it should be thought of as a metric and a description of one of the relationships that describes the housing challenge in Williston, similar to any of the others there. That said, it's a significant number. The Building Homes Together goal is a significant number. The mismatch on household sizes or the percentage of especially cost-burdened rental households in Williston, those are all pretty large numbers. And I think each of them provides a jumping off point for the select board, or if you have questions about other ways we might think about housing need in town, I think we'd be happy to answer those. How does this all relate to the town's overall planning? Any number of places we could sort of go from here, talking about the need side of this before we have any conversations about policy.
I believe that Williston has a really unique challenge, based upon, the jobs and the homes, and you answered, the rental vacancy rate. You answered a lot of questions I thought of, and the one thing I missed was the housing, the owned homes versus rental. The ratio compared to other local areas. I think Williston has a very low rental availability, correct? Compared to, South Burlington or Essex Junction versus home ownership.
Do you have the number? Did we have the number of?
There's 914 rental homes and 1,000, wait a minute. 3,129 homeowner households versus 914 rental households.
So it's almost 1 in 3 are ratio then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would say, Mike, in general, Burlington, Winooski, probably South Burlington have larger or are about to have larger proportions of rental homes than Williston does. The county sort of, that proportion tracks with kind of the development pattern in the various towns of the county. The city of Essex Junction probably has a very high proportion of rental homes now that it's its own city, encapsulating some of the new development there. And if we were to go back, there was the graphs with the orange bars that either crossed or did not cross the blue line showing affordability. And, one of the realities in comparing what sort of home a typical working household that's working in Williston can afford is that that household's more likely to be able to afford a rental home right now than an ownership home. I, like many people in this room, probably started out in a place in my life and career where I could not afford to own a home, but I could afford to rent a home. And it's often part of somebody's progression through life, and where rental is affordable, it can help somebody get ready to take that next step if ownership is sort of the stated goal. So a lot of good ways at looking at that, and certainly when we're seeing that pattern of greater numbers of multifamily residential being created, we do see both ownership and rental in the multifamily world. We see things like a Finney Crossing row home or a flat in one of the 9-plex buildings, and we also see rental being created in a 3 or 4 story apartment building. So there's a balance that gets created in multifamily. I don't think we've ever, I won't say ever, I think we have very rarely seen somebody build a single family home for the purpose of rental here. It happens at the lows of the economy when somebody builds one and they can't sell it. There were some single family homes in the hamlet that were rental homes for quite some time after 2008.
I love the Town Growth Center special designation at Tap Corners. I think the form-based code, I think it's all great stuff that you're doing. There was one, ADU, what does ADU represent?
ADU means accessory dwelling unit, often referred to as an in-law apartment or a granny flat. It's a unit that a homeowner builds that is part of their property or even sometimes part of the building they live in, and the homeowner continues to live on the property while renting that accessory unit out to someone else. So the really important distinction in Williston is when somebody wants to create an ADU, they get a permit that I can just sort of sign in the office as long as they meet the standards. They are not doing a subdivision, they are not subject to the town's growth management system, but they cannot sell that unit off separately from the primary unit. They have to stay together. And under current rules, at least until recently, under rules until recently, they had to stay living in the primary unit, and under current rules, they still have to stay living on the property. In other words, you can't create an ADU and then move away and rent both units out. And so it's less flexible than creating another ownership unit would be.
You see an increase in those ADUs?
I couldn't quote the numbers at you. I think we do about a half dozen a year, and I think it's been pretty consistent. It really provides a great option to lots of homeowners, both to bring in income, to build something new to live in, and the kids move back home into the larger unit. That's been done in Williston. Or to bring an aging parent home and have them live in a place that's close by where you can take care of them. We see all of those, or to house a child who's come back from school, wants to live in Williston but can't afford to otherwise. But it's a big undertaking to create one. It's at minimum a pretty major remodel to a home. If it's at a home in rural Williston, it requires often upgrading wastewater permit for the septic system. And if it really requires changing the septic system, most people at that point choose not to do it because of the way the wastewater rules work. And so, you know, we see about a half dozen a year. I think accessory dwelling units are great, but a lot of homeowners just aren't ready to take on the project or to become a landlord. It's great for those who can access it, but it would be hard to create, you know, tens, let alone hundreds of units in Williston through ADUs.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, so I have a lot of them, but I know we have plenty of meetings to kind of address some of them, and definitely want to take some time to gather my thoughts. But looking at finding number one in particular, and how drastically disproportionate our Williston is compared to other towns with similar retail and kind of commercial development, where do you all think that we as a town kind of operated differently than these other towns in South Burlington or Colchester? What are we doing differently that they're not, or what are they doing differently that we're not, I guess is more appropriate.
I can try to answer that. So this paper that I screenshot up there, about spatial mismatch, was quite interesting because it did like go into the history of how different towns developed in Chittenden County in the, you know, from starting in the 80s and 90s and up to 2000. And what was different about Williston is that it had attracted a lot of like commercial growth at that time, during that time, and wasn't really building a lot of housing sort of in conjunction with that commercial growth. I mean, like a really astounding amount of commercial growth. Like I think the percentage of growth over that 20 years was like over 700%. And so I think that was the difference. Whereas, you know, places like Burlington and Winooski, housing, and particularly affordable housing, was concentrated in those places, whereas the jobs were moving out to the suburbs, and housing was not being built as much out in the suburbs.
Other, Greta, did you?
I'm gonna have so many questions, but again, I don't want to take all the time tonight, certainly. But I think that this is really highlighting a lot of the things that, you know, that we've seen, that we knew these things existed. This isn't, I mean, while it's awesome to have the specific data, and it's really important in terms of creating policy and changing things going forward, I think we've all kind of known and felt all of this already. So it's really helpful, though, to see the data to kind of back up what these things we've known.
Jean?
Where to start? I think this is, again, the data is helpful, but I see our struggle is going to be sort of narrowing down what we want to fix, because clearly a lot of these issues are national issues. A single retail job is never going to be able to buy a home easily, at least with the numbers that we're looking at. So I think it's unrealistic that Williston's going to double its housing stock in order to solve this problem, especially when very nearby towns like St. George and Heinsberg are the other side of 1.5. So there is regional solutions. So while it's clear we have work to do, I think it'll be an interesting challenge to say exactly what is going to be the focus of policy and building rules and everything else in order to get what we find is most important and not try to solve everything here. Does that make sense?
Yep. Anybody else? I had a question, and it's more of a, I'm not trying to make a point with the question, so I want to be clear about that, but the gap, the ratio of jobs to publicly subsidized affordable apartments, that slide. I'm just like, I guess what I'm wondering is like, is that comparing apples and oranges, like ratio of jobs, is that all jobs? Ratio of all jobs to publicly subsidized affordable apartments? Okay, and I'm just wondering, is that, wouldn't it be more useful to have a ratio of lower paying jobs? I mean, if we've got thrown in a whole bunch of people who are making, you know, $150,000 a year who would never need a subsidized affordable apartment anyway, I'm not sure how useful that tool is. And again, I'm not trying to flag, you know, a position. I'm just curious about the math.
It might also be useful to think about what that ratio is in some of our neighboring communities. And this goes a little bit to Jean's comment as well. You know, we exist in a region. None of these towns is under a glass dome where everybody absolutely must live and work in the exact same town. It's generally pretty unlikely that will happen. As a county, though, Chittenden County also imports workers and, you know, has a jobs homes ratio that's supported by additional homes outside of its borders. And we know from looking at census data about commuting patterns that some of our lowest wage jobs are supported by a commuter workforce that comes from multifamily homes in primarily Burlington and Winooski, for example. And so maybe one of the things we could bring to you would be to look at what's the predominance of those subsidized living situations in some of our neighboring communities that probably lives behind that commute pattern that we see. And again, the question back to Williston, how does Williston want to focus on this challenge? How does it want to test its policy ideas against the stated need and what part of the need and those sorts of things? I think in general, this is leading to a conversation that's more about moving these numbers in what the town decides is the desired direction than it is necessarily moving these numbers to a desired place at a certain time. there are a whole lot of other factors outside of the town's control that affect the rate and amount of housing production. We're not going to affect the price of lumber or labor. And, you know, we're not going to affect how many people want to move to Vermont. But we can affect a few things, and we'll be talking about those.
Relative to the rest, is that it for your presentation tonight, or is there going to be more about the recommendations?
Unless you wanted to get into some of the recommendations.
How are we doing for time, Eric?
We have a couple of slides with an overview of policy items. They could do a brief intro tonight or hold those till next meeting at chair's discretion.
I think it might be better if we just absorb all of this and stop now. But there are members of the planning commission here. I'm wondering if anybody would like to
I'll get out of the way.
make a comment and give us some wisdom. Megan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Cope. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. And I appreciate all the questions that you had tonight. I think they show that you really are engaging with the topics that we're grappling with. I don't have any particular thing to add, except that we have been going over the housing needs assessment kind of with a fine-tooth comb over and over again. Melinda's presentation and the report itself from CCRPC have been really thorough. And, you know, so our attention is really starting to turn toward, you know, what to do next. And that's where we would really value some thoughts from you in our ongoing conversations. You know, I guess that's kind of all I would have to say at the moment, but if you have questions specifically for us, I'm sure I or some of the others can chime in.
What's your agenda for, I mean, like chronologically for addressing this? Is this going to be something that's a major part of your meetings starting immediately, or are you waiting for the select board to say, if you come back with that, we're not going to do it anyway? You're probably not waiting for exactly
The
that.
the scheduling details are pretty much the staff's domain. Like, they kind of help us figure out like what we can fit when. But I know that we're coming back to see you folks again at our next meeting on May 2nd. So hopefully that will give you also some time to ponder potential policy or program, you know, tweaks that we could make. I think you know, it's easy to see, you know, more housing, affordable housing as really big, just unsolvable problems. But when you start to break it down in the slideshow that we saw tonight, or in some of the programmatic dimensions that Melinda mentioned, things like, I mean, even something as simple as, or not simple, but as straightforward as the sewer attachment, attachment A, the sewer allotment. You know, all of those little pieces coming together are incrementally going to make a difference. And so just as the problem isn't really just one giant bundle, the solutions can also come from lots and lots of different dimensions or angles. And I think we're all very open and interested in hearing from you folks as well as the community, and ongoing deliberations and process. So we also have several people online, and Chapin usually wants to say something, so we should probably check to see if he's got his hand raised. I'll step away.
The rest of the commission online, if any commissioners online and just raise your hand or type in the chat here. Oh, yep, I see Chapin. Hey, Chapin, I'm going to connect you right now, just a moment. Hey, Chapin, you're on. Can you hear us?
Hello, yes. I just wanted to say two side points. One is that Williston has put a lot of effort into growth management. And we have, probably very wisely, when you asked about what do we do differently from other towns, we've earlier on limited our sewer area and designated a growth center. And so we've maintained slower growth in the residential and very much slower growth in the rural areas by focusing development at Taft Corners. That's one thing. And if we were to meet the goals in that presentation, we would have to exceed our growth management goals, which have an effect on the town, even with putting most of it at the growth center. The other point, actually, I'll just leave it at that for the moment. To me, we haven't addressed that part of things. I do want to say the other point, which is that we really, to me, the difference in available housing to what people can afford who work in Williston is striking. And I don't want to see us with a bunch of buildings put up at Taft Corners that are all affordable units. I really think we want to see affordability distributed in different areas. And that's what inclusionary zoning can do, where we say a development greater than so many houses must have such and such a % of affordability units. And so I just want to stress that I think that value is shared by most of the Planning Commission. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from either the select board or anybody in attendance?
The Town of Williston Comprehensive Growth Plan, that's coming up in '25, correct?
Yes, I'll address that. Williston will need to adopt a new town plan by, at the latest, the end of August of 2025. We'll be beginning our public engagement process around that plan over the next fiscal year. And, you know, in a town like Williston that is growing at one rate or another pretty much all the time, a lot of that comprehensive plan is how will the town address, deal with, react to, and shape that growth to meet the goals that it expresses in that comprehensive plan. There's a lot more to the comprehensive plan than necessarily just what will happen in zoning as a result of it, but we will be looking at that. We will probably in the near future, as we sort of alluded to tonight, be talking about some policy adjustments that can be made ahead of the town plan, but I would expect that the adopted 2025 town plan is going to have a significant element about looking at the performance of any bylaw or other changes that are made. Is the town doing better at meeting its stated goals? Does the town want to state new goals about housing? And what is the town going to do for the life of the 2025 plan about this and every other issue that the plan will address? So keep in mind, comprehensive plans in Vermont are valid for 8 years. So what you consider in 2024 and hopefully adopt in mid-2025 will be the town's game plan through 2032. And it will be, you know, doing things that will, you know, maybe not even be visible until 2050. It's very, very long range planning. So right now there's a needs assessment that says this is what the needs are as of right now or as of the 2020 census. There are some policy adjustments to think about within the context of the town plan that's in effect right now and how it talks about these things. And then very shortly from now, there's a big conversation where this becomes part of everything that the town says, what are we going to do between 25 and 2032? And what are we leading towards in the more distant future than that?
Thank you.
Great.
So I'm just still a little bit unclear on what sort of the next steps are, because it seems like a really heavy lift, honestly, to figure out where to start. So I'm just going to say, for instance, if we're all sitting here kind of stunned that we don't have enough at the gap between what people earn and what they can, how they can afford to live in Williston. If that is sort of where we want to make some progress before 2032, what kind of levers would that be? And I do understand you can do an awful lot of things like the inclusionary zoning, but that might get you a handful of houses. But is there something that could get you 100? So that's where I'm really interested in is just don't throw everything on the wall and see what sticks, but maybe really target what our main goal is and how we make it happen. I just don't know how. I did listen in on one of the planning commission 2-hour conversations on this, and it's very complicated, and I admire all of you for your depth of knowledge and your ability to share your thoughts with each other in a really very civil and clear way. But this is not. This is a little more complicated than the library MOU, and it's going to take some work. So I'd be interested. I don't expect an answer tonight, but between Matt and Eric and Ted, how do we make some progress as a team?
Really very briefly, we are going to come back. We're going to talk about, as we said, some potential policy adjustments that might move things more in the direction of solving some of these challenges, and at least not in a direction that's away from them. And Melinda used the term, and I use the term a lot too, of programmatic things. And what we really mean when we say programmatic is everything else that's not changing the zoning bylaw. We have a housing trust fund. We have a goal of establishing a housing trust fund committee to administer that fund. The select board will every year have before it budget decisions to make about what kind of funds to put into that trust fund. And we have some homework to do about how to best put that money to work. There are towns in Vermont making really big programmatic decisions about housing. There's an article in VT Digger today about a project on Main Street in Windsor moving forward. I forget the exact number of units, so I'm not going to quote it. It's a 3-story building on Windsor Main Street on a vacant lot next to the diner. And that project is moving forward in part because the town pledged $200,000 of its ARPA money toward that project. That's a programmatic decision. It's a budgetary decision that has a very direct impact. The town of Waterbury recently made a decision to sell a building and site that it was no longer using to a company that develops affordable homes. And there was a big public meeting about that and a big decision to be made about that. That's a programmatic action. There are communities in New England that are buying and remediating lots with decrepit buildings or subsurface soil pollution issues and then making them available to preferred developers who want to create affordable housing. Closer to home, the city of St. Albans announced this week that they're moving forward on a project on a brownfield that the city acquired over 10 years ago, partnering with, I believe, Evernorth to build a mixed income and affordable apartment complex on that site. So there are things that are a lot harder than amending a zoning bylaw that can produce a lot more housing, especially the really affordable stuff. And we'd like the town to think about all of those things over time as we move forward here.
Melinda?
And I just wanted to add to that from a success story in Williston over the last year, which was partially some tweaks in our regulations were made, but some of it was programmatic involving, and I'm talking about the Zephyr Place, which is 72 units of affordable housing converted from an old hotel. So that's a success story, and that's some of it was a programmatic decision to refund impact fees and, you know, and to amend, make a bylaw amendment that would allow that project to work.
So, to be continued, it's, the answer is there's no answer tonight. But we are gonna have a number of more meetings about this. The planning commission is gonna continue its work, and I think all we can say right now is we're gonna keep asking the right questions and feel our way out and, get resolutions as best we can. So, okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you all for making this a priority
Yeah.
for our town. This is really important work, and this is something that we really need to address. Again, this is not new. We've known this is something that needed to be addressed, but I really appreciate that you all are so supportive of this and you know, really have put in a lot of time and work to highlight the work that we still need to do, which is obviously a lot, but thank you, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no good way to segue from such a heavy issue to the next one, but liquor and tobacco license renewals. Eric?
Select board meetings, one thing to another.
Yes.
So, just rounding out renewals here, it's just a couple liquor license renewals for board's consideration this evening. I've distributed in a transmittal in your packet. I will note one of these establishments did receive a warning letter from DLC last summer. A manager has supplied, from their corporate office, supplied the board a letter addressing that issue for your review as well. You have these before you to consider this evening.
Okay. So if there are any questions for Eric, that would be this would be the moment to ask them. Otherwise, there is a proposed motion.
Just quickly, the deadline is soon, right? Like, so this will be the last round, theoretically?
Theoretically, when I checked in with the town clerk the other day, there still are a couple establishments that have not, after multiple reminders, have submitted their renewal. So there's a possibility if they want to renew them still, this could come back before the board on May 2nd if there's a couple. But yeah, it should be the last, but might not be the last. It depends if they want to renew their license or not from people we haven't heard from.
I will, gosh, I gotta find it now. I'll move to approve the liquor license renewals as transmitted dated April 18th, 2023 for a 1-year period through April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Manager's report.
So also a couple things I'll highlight from my written report this evening. Towns are fortunate to receive a transportation alternatives grant from Vermont Agency of Transportation, a $300,000 grant. This will be a sidewalk project on Industrial Avenue, I believe on the eastern side, starting at the Route 2 end. I don't think it will get us all the way up to Route 2A, but I know it's a good portion of. I've got the plan map with the application somewhere I can share with the board to put a visual behind it. I'll find that this week and forward it on to you. But good work for this grant for the town. We continue to work to fill in these sidewalk gaps, and especially with this is a major employment center. We have a town park on one end of the road, some residential neighborhoods as well. So working to tie everything together here. Our Community Center Scoping and Library Assessment Steering Committee. Interviews are wrapping up on the 24th, and then the committee is going to be working on the second outreach wave, which will be a written survey instrument that will be sent out to the community in May. Anticipating the end work product of the committee, working with our architectural consultant, is a report looking at these different options and the pros and cons to each. I'm anticipating that will get back to the select board and library trustees probably late summer or so, just seeing how things line up the next couple of months. So that's certainly a big project on the horizon here to discuss as well. And then it up to the board, and I've got a couple of these flyers leaving your mailboxes, Terry and Jean, but we're gearing up for Green Up Day on Saturday, May 6th. Really, our planning department does a great job in leading this organization and our staff there. This will be our second year of the town fair. It's a way for folks to interact with departments, some local nonprofits, some activities. I think looks like we're having a yoga class for everyone to stretch out before they green up at 9 o'clock, and we've got some town band's gonna have a brief concert. We'll have our fire department there, open house at the schoolhouse. So we found a very welcome last year by this event for the community, and hopefully we'll have a beautiful day again. But now we'll plan to get a tent again to help for any weather. And thanks to our planning department for organizing this every year. And that's all I have for manager's report this evening.
Okay. Other business?
Couple of brief items for the board. I am currently the Communications Union District Representative for the town. I'm anticipating, so I've been serving to help get the governance in place for this regional entity since the turn of the year. I found myself as chair of it right now as well, helping to move it forward. Happy to do it regionally, but we're planning to post this position to see if there's any community members who would be interested in serving as the primary. Probably in the next month or so we'll get that posted. I think the board will be in a spot where it starts to get more technical here as we look to bring on consultants. But I realize we don't have any alternates right now. I'm planning on some leave coming up. I want to make sure we have representation at these meetings if I'm not able to attend. So that's on the board to consider appointing assistant to the manager, Erin Dickinson, to the alternate to the Communications Union District Board. So she may attend if I'm not able to for a couple meetings here.
Any questions for Eric on that? If not, there is a proposed motion.
I move to appoint Aaron Dickinson as Williston's alternate to the Chittenden County Communications Union District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is there any other business?
2 catering permits for the board's consideration. One that came in today, it looks like it's on May the 3rd, from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock at Gordon's Window Decor on Leroy Road in town. It's using Sugar Snap Catering. It looks like to be a private celebration party. It looks like a staff party at that location with a caterer that we've seen in town many times. The board would need to consider action on this catering permit. Staff has no concerns as it's presented to us.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
And second catering permit, it's a wedding at the Isham Family Barn by a Catering by Dale event. And it is, I have the date here, June 17th is the wedding. Again, this is established a facility to host these events. Town staff has no concerns with this application.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. That's all I have. Any other business? Hearing none, we are adjourned.